Happy Friday to you, sailors. Today we are wrapping up our animal anecdote stories and making the scene with our pet as vivid, as gripping, as exciting as possible. We really capture our pets or our animal of our choice, his personality, and his fun little writing. And so today I want to open by giving you a mentor text example from a very famous author and beloved author, Gary Paulsen, author of Hatchet, Dog Song, Wood Song. And he's a cool guy because he lives in northern Minnesota, and he was a big hunter, trapper, dog sledder, and then writing about nature, animals, and his experiences. And this one is a first person account of a really cool thing that happened with two of his dogs. So it's a perfect mentor text example of an anecdote. Then you get some writing time to just further develop your draft. And even if you think you're done, we're going to show you some really cool things you can do to make those fireball word choices come alive. And then we're just going to walk you through revising and editing checklists, make sure you have the goods, and then offer some peer editing time to you. And then we threw some teacher examples on here for you to peruse at your leisure. But if you'd like to visit today's agenda slide, you can go ahead and find our mentor text example. And it's called The Dogs Could Teach Me. So I'm going to let that load. This is usually in a normal year after we finish reading Jack London's Call of the Wild. We use this piece as our final exam. We'll use something a little bit different this year, but I really wanted you to have the experience of reading this by Gary Paulsen. So it's a cool little anecdote, a thing that happens with his dogs. So I'll blow it up a little bit. So he's up in the cold. He's talking about how strange the cold is, the chill of the air, deep cold, 60 below zero cold. Steel becomes brittle and breaks, shatters, breath taken straight into the throat will freeze the lining, burst blood vessels, eyes exposed too long will freeze, fingers and toes freed, turn black, break off. These are all known normal parts of intense cold. So I love his vivid description. And he talks about how it changes beauty as well. Things are steep in new clarity, a clear focus. Sound seems to ring. The air seems to be filled with diamonds when ice crystals form. And he's talking about being out on a river in Alaska, and he saw a place once where a whirlpool had frozen into a cone, open at the bottom like a beautiful trap, waiting to suck in the whole team, his whole sled dog team. So just the beauty and the deadliness of extreme cold. This part, he's at home and he's in northern Minnesota, and he had this cool experience with his dogs. The dogs he runs as a trapper out in his wilderness in the land that he owns. So let's take a look. After a time, I stopped trapping. That change, as with many changes, occurred because of the dogs. As mentioned, I had hunted when I was young, trapping and killing many animals. I never thought it wrong until the dogs came. And then it was a simple thing, almost a silly thing, that caused this change. And so he's going to share this story with us, this little lively, punchy little anecdote. So it's about a column and a half of reading that I'm going to read to you. And I want you to notice a couple things. How does he bring his dog characters to life? Because this is a true story. That's what an anecdote is, a lively but true, punchy little tale. And then how does he use action, description, and a lot of voice to bring it to life? And any neat sentence fluency tactics he uses like we've studied. In the summer, Columbia had a sense of humor, and I saw it. In the summer, the dogs live in the kennel area, each dog with his own house on a chain that allows him to move in a circle. They can run only with the wheeled carts on cool nights, and sometimes they get bored being tied up. To alleviate the boredom, we give the dogs large beef bones to chew and play with. They get a new bone every other day or so, and these bones are the center of much contention. We call them the bone wars. Sometimes dogs clear across the kennel will hold their bones up in the air, look at each other, raise their hair, and start growling at each other, posturing and bragging about their bones. But not Columbia. Usually, Columbia just chewed on his bone until the meat was gone, and then he buried it and waited for the next bone. I never saw him fight or get involved in bone wars, and I always saw him a simple, perhaps better word would be primitive dog, basic and very wolf-like, until one day when I was sitting in the kennel. I had a notebook, and I was sitting on the side of Cookie's roof, writing. The dogs are good company for working, when I happened to notice Columbia doing something strange. So here's where the anecdote takes off. He was sitting quietly on the outside edge of his circle, at the maximum length of his chain. With one paw he was pushing his bone, which still had a small bit of meat on it, out and away from him toward the next circle. Next to Columbia was a dog named Olaf. While Columbia was relatively passive, Olaf was very aggressive. Olaf always wanted to fight, and he spent much time arguing over bones, females, the weather, anything and everything that caught his fancy. He was much scarred from fighting, with notched ears and lines on his muzzle, but he was a very good dog, strong and honest, and we liked him. Being next to Columbia, Olaf had tried many times to get him to argue or bluster, but Columbia always ignored him until this morning. Carefully, slowly, Columbia pushed the bone toward Olaf's circle. And of all the things that Olaf was, tough, strong, honest, he wasn't smart. As they say, some are smarter than others, and some are still not so smart. And then there was Olaf. It wouldn't be fair to call Olaf dumb. Dogs don't measure those things like people, but even in the dog world, he would not be known as a whip. Kind of a big bully who was also a bit of a doofus. When he saw Columbia pushing the bone toward him, he began to reach for it. Straining against his chain, turning and trying to get farther and farther, he reached as far as he could with the middle toe of his right front foot, the claw going out as far as possible. But not quite far enough. Columbia had measured it to the millimeter. He slowly pushed the bone until it was so close that Olaf's claw, with Olaf straining so hard his eyes bulged, just barely touched it. Columbia sat back and watched Olaf straining and pushing and fighting. And when this had gone on for a long time, many minutes, and Olaf was still straining for all he was worth, Columbia leaned back and laughed. And then Columbia walked away, and I could not kill or trap any longer. It happened almost that fast. I had seen dogs with compassion for each other and their young, and with anger and joy and hate and love, but this humor went into me more than the other things. It was so complicated. To make the joke up in his mind, the joke with the bone and the bully, and then set out to do it carefully and quietly, to do it and then laugh and walk away, all of it was so complicated, so complex, that it triggered a chain reaction in my mind. If Columbia could do that, I thought, if a dog could do that, then a wolf could do that. If a wolf could do that, then a deer could do that. If a deer could do that, then a beaver and a squirrel and a bird and and I quit trapping then. It was wrong for me to kill. And so ends our little anecdote. He goes on to other stories, this other cool experience with his dogs and their great intelligence and great love. But this cool trick that Columbia played on Olaf. What an awesome little anecdote. And so I'm going to pause. I want you to talk with your podmate. What part could you really see? What part could you see? Or if there's any strong word choices or cool sentence fluency bits that really strike you. Okay? So chat with your neighbors. I will pause. So much to love here. I love the growling, their posturing, their bragging right here, those awesome verb choices. We noted on the first day of school that if you use short sentences for drama, that adds a lot of intensity and tension into your piece, like, but not Columbia. And then he did it again later. He did it until this morning. So 2 of those short sentences for drama. Speaking of sentence fluency, notice we learned how when you start with an ly, an adverb, it's a really cool, neat way to start. Instead of always starting with the, he, Columbia, carefully, slowly, Columbia pushed the bone. So check out your writing. You could add an ly opener to your sentence. I also saw a nice little complex sentence in Awubis. When he saw Columbia pushing the bone toward him, comma, he began to reach for it. So it opens with a dependent clause here. So check that out on your checklist. You need a complex sentence, or you could have when you're writing. That would be cool. You need at least 2 types of these cool sentence structures. Here is a participial phrase, an ing opener, straining against this chain, turning and trying to get farther and farther. He reached as far as he could. So that's really cool. So our author, he's got very fluent, lively sentences, but what could you see? Totally zooms in on that dumb Olaf, right? Straining so hard, his eyes bulging, right? His claw reaching out, his toenail just touching it. That was so cool. So this is all action, description, vivid word choices, and a beautiful mentor text example of what is good writing. And so I want to go ahead and go back to our agenda, and I'm going to pause and I want to give you some time to develop your piece. So again, it's under animal anecdote writing. You're writing it right here on this document. And we had a lot of little guides for you on here. You're doing show versus tell. You're adding in some lively figurative language, at least one cut type, and then those fluent sentence structures that we found in our piece from Gary Paulsen. You just need at least 2 types, okay? So teachers pause. I want you to give students around 10 minutes to continue developing the writing. If they're working well, you can add a few more minutes. And then we're going to go through a revising and editing checklist, and then perhaps some peer feedback. So I'll see you in about 10-15 minutes. Okay, so you've brought this piece to a close, and it doesn't have to be incredibly long, but it's a short, amusing, entertaining piece about an animal in your life, showcasing the quirkiness, the intelligence, the loyalty of your pet. So it's kind of like a show versus tell account of your pet using character traits. You wrote it here. I'd love for you to make sure that you've spell checked. Okay, so make sure there's no red squiggly lines, that every sentence starts with a capital letter. So buzz through that. But then other things to look for, you've got great action, that you've used some lively verbs in your piece. You need to highlight your figurative language. You needed 1 type, so a simile. He bounces up and down like a furry ball. If you used a metaphor, you call your animal another thing, like my cat speeds around corners, a streak of gray lightning. If you use sound, arf, arf, personification, exaggeration, you get it. Find yours, go ahead and highlight your figurative language, okay? Teachers, you can pause to give students time to go through each bit of our checklist. All right, after that, the way we saw ly adverb openers in Gary Paulsen's The Bone Wars, the way we saw ing openers, the way we saw complex sentences, you need at least 2, okay? So maybe in a positive. My cat, Franklin Lightning Pants, devours his fancy feast meaty bits. Or my cat, a furry tank, what does he do? Okay? They use that in our scope articles a couple different times. Like Scout, a cute little brown dog, comma, da-da-da. Okay? Maybe you want to use an ing opener, like straining against his chain, landing on his nimble paws, comma, he speeds around corners. Open a sentence with an adverb, an ly instead, like viciously, gently, quietly, craftily, abruptly. Double adjective, fueled and hyper, comma, eager and determined. Compound sentence, just 2 sentences joined with and then the awubis, since, as, after, while. Okay? So I'd love for you to underline that sentence opener to showcase you have 2 types of really cool sentence structure, so it's not just the, my dog, he. Okay? Use your skills. I will pause, make sure that happens. And lastly, bold your best. What are your best fireball word choices? You need at least 3 bolded. You can go beyond 3, but maybe instead of just dog, you use a precise noun like it's a German Shepherd. Maybe you're in love with your action verbs like we saw in Gary Paulsen, like prowling, straining, lunging, charging, erupting. Bold those. Maybe you have some beautiful adjectives, frisky, hyper, determined. Gary Paulsen definitely used some different adjectives. He talked about just adjectives for, strong, tough, honest. Okay, so go ahead and do that. If you need some awesome word choices in Google Classroom for you all the time, on the bottom, scroll and roll down under classwork, there are some language arts help sheets for you, and it says language arts help sheets. Just check it out. There's some amazing action verbs here. Click on it, scroll and roll down. There's some great verbs for fast movement, slow movement. I don't want to see any walks, went. I should not see that in your writing at all, but I want chased, darted, ambled, nabbed, mauled, sped, jolted. Okay, if it's a slow movement, what's it doing? Okay, he's gliding, traipsing. Okay, other action verbs are in here if you need a word for chase, bumping, breaking, eating. Maybe your pet's eating it, so it's inhaling, gobbling, devouring. Awesome. You enjoy these. You scroll through, find the best. Okay. There's also character traits, physical traits for your pet so that it comes to life. Okay. If your pet's thin, heavy, so different words for the body. Then it has words for the hair, the coat of your pet, which would be really cool to zoom in, the face. Okay, so these are fantastic. And then just different character traits, like instead of funny, which is overused, it's hysterical, it's comical. If your pet is enthusiastic, right? Hyper, earnest, exuberant, passionate, okay? Friendly, she's amiable. So enjoy those word choices. So I would like you to bold your best. I will pause, use your resources, comb through, find your best, and we'll meet you back. Okay, should you want some more inspiration beyond what we have for you, Mrs. McCaskey wrote a nice little anecdote about her cat Esther. And Esther is invited outside to sit on the patio swing next to the pool and enjoy some McCaskey time. So some good things. McCaskey's using traipse, leaps, responds, like a glorious queen is her simile, opens with a prepositional phrase with my heart full, looking over to the slider door. There's a nice participial phrase. So cool stuff she's got going on in there. And I've left mine on here all week, and I had my edits available so you could see just how you, if instead of starting with my cat is hyper, my cat, Franklin Lightning Pants, devours his fancy feast meaty bits and races wildly through the house. So you can see how I reformed my sentences so they flow. Okay. And last thing, pure editing. Share your piece. So digitally hit that share button. Find somebody, it can be in your crew or beyond. Share your piece. And as you're reading somebody else's, I would love for you to do Alt-Control-M. A comment box will pop up on their document and give them some feedback. I love your use of description here, or I love your simile. I can totally see that. Or if something's unclear, you can put, I wonder how you could. Okay? So give each other some feedback. And then teachers at the end, should you have some time, we have a little video here of dog moods during quarantine. Okay, dog moods during lockdown for you to enjoy. Okay, so at this point, drafting, revising, editing, peer feedback, and this bad girl will be due Monday. But of course, you're invited to go ahead and submit today. So thanks for your work bringing your pet to life and your anecdote, and we'll see you back here next week.